High school life is always said to be all rosy, lots of friends, sports, romances, and so on. But not all students are interested in those things. Some prefer their gray, quiet, and empty days, as in the case of our protagonist, Hotaro Oreki. He is a guy who has only one friend named Satoshi Fukue, who he has known since elementary school. So Hotaro tells him that he has decided to join the classic literature club because his sister, who is traveling to India, sent him a letter asking him to join the club, which was about to close due to the lack of members. And although he was supposed to be the only member of the club, when he arrived he noticed a very pretty girl looking out the window. She was Eru Chitanda, another member who joined the classic literature club. But how will Chitanda get in if she didn't have the key to the club? She replied that the door was unlocked, but when Otaro arrived, it was locked. And at the mention of the mystery, Chitanda's eyes lit up and she asked a bunch of questions about the case. Then his friend Satoshi appeared to joke that Hotaro already had a new girlfriend, but after hearing her last name, he was surprised because apparently the eldest daughter of the Chitanda family is known for her beautiful features and intelligence. Although later Satoshi mentioned again the mystery of how Chitanda got locked up, she prevents our protagonist from leaving because he was curious to know how everything happened, and our protagonist was literally hypnotized by her charms, so he agreed to solve the mystery. First, he asked her how long ago she entered the room. She answered that it was about 30 minutes before he arrived. At that moment, he can hear as if someone was pressing something, so Otaro leaves the room and takes them to a man who was changing the lights in the rooms. So he concluded that the man made some arrangements in the room, and when he left, Chitanda entered and the man closed the room with her inside. Before everyone left, Chitanda proposed to Satoshi to join the club to have a good time, but now our protagonist didn't feel like it anymore. But once again, he was seduced by Chitanda's charms, so without knowing what to do, he gave her his registration letter. So after a month of being a member of the classic literature club, Chitanda told him that spending days without objectives was not productive, so she wanted to do some activities for the club, such as sending an anthology to the cultural festival. So they begin to look for information to see what the anthology could be about. Then they go to the library where there is a manager named Ibarra who already knew our protagonist. After they explain to them why they are looking for past anthologies of the literature club, Satoshi asks permission to tell them a new story that will put our protagonist's brain to work, since it was obvious that it would arouse Chitanda's curiosity. The story goes like this. Ibarra has her shift every Friday after school, and every week the same book is returned, and so far it has been returned for 5 weeks in a row. The book was too big to be a simple history book. Every week a different person picked it up, but it was returned on the same day at almost the same time. So after Chitanda had been insisting for a while, Hotaro agreed to solve this new mystery. After a while of thinking, he came to the conclusion that the book was not used for literary purposes and that it was taken out by pure second-year girls. In addition, Chitanda could detect a certain smell of paint thinner in the book, and with that clue, Hotaro was able to discover something. So he takes them to the art room where Chitanda recognized the same smell from the book, and when they arrived they noticed that there were several paintings with different girls posing with the book, and everything could be discovered by our protagonist instantly. So now he had two girls with the same curious eyes. Once the weekend arrived, Chitanda called our protagonist's house to meet him in a coffee shop because she had something important to tell him. Once they met, she was very nervous, and as a joke, our protagonist tells her if she will confess her feelings or something like that, but in the end, she only asks him for a personal favor. Her uncle went to India 7 years ago, and since then he has been missing. She begins to tell him her story, where she found out that he belonged to the literature club, and even though he always answered all her questions, no matter how silly they were, when she asked him about something related to this club, he held back from answering her. After a while, though, he did answer her. However, the answer made Chitanda cry, and her uncle did not try to calm her down. She seemed to have forgotten those memories until she started high school, and that made her curious again. Although this time poor protagonist did not feel like helping her, since that favor was something very personal that could affect her, and he did not want to take on such a big responsibility. But our protagonist was curious to know why she only went to him if she has more friends, to which she replies that she is not one of those people who like to go around telling her past to anyone she sees. So having said all this, our protagonist decides to help her. In those days, he received another letter from his sister who was now in Istanbul. But the surprising thing was that she knew that the literature club would make an anthology since in previous years she did it too. So she told him where her old anthologies were hidden, which supposedly were in a chemistry closet, and once they arrived at the place, they met a guy named Togaito, who belongs to the Wall Newspaper Club and who also used a room, the organ, that only our main character could detect. Something strange was that when he mentioned to them about the anthologies of the old club, he didn't seem to want to give them anything, although after being insisted, he agreed to let them check the room. But something seemed strange to him, so he proposed to ask the janitor for help to check the whole room, which caused the guys to get upset and not want to tell them and to let them move anything. But that was just what Hotaru wanted to achieve, so he left, but not before telling him that if he found the anthologies, he should give them to him. Then they go out and wait outside for a moment. After 5 minutes, Hotaru says it's time to go back into the room, and by magic the anthologies appeared. Then he explained to them that he used a bit of intimidation with that guy. Basically, he just wanted to hide that he was smoking in the club and hid his cigarette in that chemistry cabinet. But later, Chitanda secretly told Hotaru that the Hyouka anthology number 2 was the one she found when she was a child, and when they took a look at it, they discovered that a man named Sekitani was Chitanda's uncle, but after he left a year later, he went from being a hero to a legend. But both Satoshi and Hotaru rejected Chitanda's idea since he said that being called a hero could be because maybe his uncle confronted thieves or violent people, and that's why he ended up being like that. Then they reviewed the varas and they didn't like it much either, although they had a little break to it onigiri made by Chitanda, while they took a look at Satoshi's hypothesis, which said that there couldn't have been violence in the incident, but that it was something that affected the whole school and made everyone unite, or someone could have won the support of all the students. At the end, it was the turn of our main character who didn't really have any idea nor his hypothesis made. Before he said a word, he began to feel overwhelmed by all the energy expenditure he had to do, but the rain was his salvation, since that made Chitanda have to go to get some things, and Hotaru took the opportunity to go to the bathroom for a moment. Although, on his way he found a room with the door half open, so he decided to give it a look, and what he found was Chitanda's room, with all his research about the case, so once in the bathroom, he began to think about even the smallest detail to have a good explanation. So after a while, he went back to join the others to have and to give a general explanation. The students were supposedly all involved because they will certain their beloved cultural festival, and that's where Chitanda's uncle could come in, since Hyouka mentioned him as in the last year he went from hero to a legend. The cultural festival will run another exciting 5 days this year. What does he mean by this? Hotaru affirmed that this event was the achievement that Sekitano obtained because thanks to his sacrifice of being expelled, he was able to avoid the shortening of his beloved cultural festival. But there was also another doubt. Why did they take so long in his expulsion? And it was because literally, if they took him out of the festival, the mess would have been worse. That's why they waited until it was over and then they did it. And with that, he concluded his hypothesis. That made a lot of sense. So they ended the meeting and Chitanda thanked Hotaru for his help. However, days later, our protagonist receives a phone call from his sister, who, after telling him everything that was happening on her trip, suddenly mentioned something about John Sekitani and the Kanya festival, since that was a great tragedy that disappointed her, but Hotaru understood that mysterious incident did not happen, as he put it, because he did not believe that there was someone who would ruin his school life for his classmates. So he called everyone in the club together again to mention to them that possibly that heroic act will have been more than a sacrifice, so they will go to see the person who wrote the prologue, Yoko Koriyama, who was the school librarian. So in order to clear her doubts before everyone, Hotaru asked her if she was the one who wrote the prologue, and when she confessed that she was the one who wrote it, she immediately knew what topic they wanted to get to. After a while, Hotaro told her all his hypotheses about what could have happened in that incident. She was surprised because he said that as if he had witnessed everything that happened. So now he would go straight to the point. So she began to tell that it was just as our protagonist said. The directors wanted to shorten the festival from 5 days to only 2, which caused an uproar, which no one wanted to be the leader, but they chose Chitanda's uncle as the chosen one, while the real Sekitani was another guy who led from behind and never made his name public. Although the very stupid ones made a bonfire to boost their mood, that is when the incident happened, as a fire broke out and the sports building was destroyed. So the school didn't forgive that behavior and decided to show an example by expelling the supposed leader of the movement, and since no one could do anything to help him, he just didn't say anything to the others. But his Hyouka mythology was a perfect complaint of what happened to him, since he had a wolf symbol of the school and some rabbits who were the students. Well, there was a rabbit that was eaten by that wolf, implying that he was Sekitani. Although no one knew why his uncle chose that name for the anthology, our protagonist was the only one who managed to interpret that title because Hyouka translated into English meant ice cream, but there is a hidden meaning in those words because it could also be pronounced as ice cream. And when Chitanda heard those words, she began to cry because she could remember everything her uncle told her when she asked him about Hyouka. Thus, they conclude that mystery, and Chitanda could finally be free of that cruel memory that tormented her. Days later, during the summer vacation, our little group goes on a trip to the mountains to stay at a lodge near to the hot springs that belongs to Ibarra's family. However, when our main character decides to go to the hot springs, he ends up meeting Chitanda, but once he gets there he faints because of the heat and also because he managed things he shouldn't have with Chitanda. That is why his best friend helped her to take him to their room, and when he wanted to be alone, out of nowhere she seemed worried about what happened to him. However, when it started to get dark, Ibarra's 2 little cousins told them a story about the abandoned room next door. Basically, it's a legend about a person scream followed by a shadow of someone hanging from one side to the other. So that room have to be closed, and our protagonist notices a girl running outside the lodge, but he didn't give it much attention. The next day, Ibarra tells that she woke up at midnight and could see a shadow that frightened her. And with this new mystery that Chitanda could also see, it was our protagonist's turn to think. So they go to the forbidden room, and on the way they meet Kayo, one of Ibarra's cousins, to ask for help in their investigation about the shadow of the hanged man, but she does not allow them to do so. Although, while they were eating, Hotaro felt that a shadow was watching him, so on the way to the hot springs, he began to think about what that legend could be, and thanks to a back detail that his best friend told him, he could find an answer, since that shadow was a Yutaka hand to dry, and the possible person who did it was Kayo, since she was jealous of her sister, Yukata, and wanted to use it, but obviously her sisters would never lend it to her since she marks everything that is her property. But Kayo didn't care, and even so she used it to go to the festival, and that's where the girl that our protagonist saw almost at dusk enters. Although for her misfortune, that day it was raining, and since the next day they would light fireworks, it was obvious that her sister would want to use her yutaka. So she decided to put it to dry in the only place where no one could see it. That is room number 7, and that shadow was the moonlight that was shining through the window. Chitanda didn't want to believe that the siblings would be like that with each other, but those female things tend to happen. Then they found the sister getting along very well, so that's as far as the mystery goes. Days later, Chitanda invites the entire literature club to a preview of a movie produced by the classroom of a childhood friend named Fuyumi Irisu, who is the daughter of a family that has a very good relationship with Chitanda's family. However, before starting to watch the movie, Irisu tells them that at the end they would like to ask them something. So after a long time watching that mystery movie that were about a group of friends visited a mysterious house in the forest and decided to take a look at it, they find different abandoned objects. However, in what would be the climax, a character named Kaito appears and he bled to death. But when the movie was getting good, it ended. Then Irisu appears and asks them who they think is the culprit, besides telling them a few details about the filming, since they had a problem because the girl who was in charge of doing it had the bad luck of getting sick and not being able to finish it. But Irisu wanted to make sure that when someone sees the film as it is, they can deduce who the culprit is, and thus finish her project in a good way. So she needed their honest opinion. Nobody understood anything except for our protagonist, who was an expert in these kinds of cases. He had to think to give his answer, but he didn't want to do the work of someone else, so he refused to help her, but as expected from Chitanda began to screw him with his curiosity. That's why the next day they will be observers of three detectives saying their theory about the film. Everyone except for Hotaro opined 1,001 things that did not lead to any solution. Our protagonist asked for the script to take a look at it and refresh his ideas. After hearing the theories of the three detectives, they were all rejected, since no one of them came close to achieving what the script girl wanted to show as a possible ending. However, when Hotaro was on his way home, he met Irisu, who asked him for some time to go for tea, and once there, she confessed to him that from the beginning she knew that those three detectives didn't have the ability to discover that ending, but that she only used them to make her protagonist reject the proposals, and so he was almost forced to say his own. Besides, she always looked for him and not for the literature club, since she had a great interest in seeing with her own eyes the capacity of our protagonist. The next day, during the vacation, our protagonist had to go to school to help her. Once he arrived, he begins to work on the ending of that movie, watching it a few times to get a clear idea. Then he calls Irisu to give her his conclusion and comments that in the room where the character Kaito died could not have entered or left any of the other members. It was also impossible that the murderer used the window, so he could only enter through the door. And as they did not specify whether the door was manipulated or not, it was logical to believe that the murderer used a master key. However, the whole building was being searched by the little group, but there was a fact that went unnoticed, and it was that there was actually a seventh character, or the guy who was recording all the events and illuminated some characters with his flashlight. But what if it was a logical reason to believe that the murderer was always the cameraman who was with them? There was a scene where the camera was fixed in the lobby, so it was a good excuse to say that the seventh character left the camera there and took the opportunity to do the murder, and finally finished his job. Irisu left him alone, but not before mentioning that he actually has a unique ability that no one else has. However, on the day of the show, his little group from the club didn't seem as surprised as usual, apart from the fact that Chitanda tried to tell him something, but she wasn't able to. But Ibarra mentioned it to him and asked him if he had thought of that ending, since the characters didn't use an important element that the girl in the script kept mentioning, a road that even one of the detectives takes into account for his theory. After having made all that logical ending on his own, they wanted to send his job to hell because of a simple rope he forgot to put in. Besides that, all of them now understood the mystery perfectly except for our main character, who felt a bit bad about those criticisms. But he remembered Satoshi's advice about looking at things from a different perspective, so he understood everything. The next day, she invited Irisu for tea to tell her that all that stuff about his ability was just a lie because she only needed a mystery writer. Besides that, he investigated a poll of the classroom about how the ending of the movie should be, and among the votes, there was one nullified because one of the votes didn't want there to be any death in the movie, and that was the vote of the kid who wrote the script. To sum it all up, in the movie there came a point where Hongo ignored the poll and wanted to make the ending she wanted, but as she was too shy to tell her classmates, to record everything again. That's where Irisu will come in to save her and tell her that she got sick, but she also couldn't finish the script. And as she did not like any of the endings that her classmates gave her, she decided to involve the literature club so that in the end, Hotaro will end up writing everything. In other words, she manipulated it very nicely. After a few days, the long-awaited Kanya festival finally arrived, and now it will only last 3 days. Reason why all the students decorated it and created the best attractions to have fun. The literature club had planned to sell 30 copies of their anthology, but due to an error of Ibarra, they ended up taking them an order of 200 copies. So in order to sell them, all they had the idea of creating a new sales stand in some other part of the festival. Although for that, they had to obtain a special permission from the student council, so Chitanda will be in charge of negotiating with the president of the council, while Satoshi will be in charge of the publicity of the club, participating in all the available events to try to be the first. In short, everyone will do part of the work, while our protagonist will stay toward the stand and do nothing. This is how we see that Chitanda can't do her job well because she gets easily distracted by anything. So after a while, Chitanda returns to the literature club to leave all the mess she was carrying. Our protagonist observes a small part of what seemed to be photos of Chitanda while she was convincing Togaito to put them somewhere in the newspaper. It was obvious that he would say no. On his way, he also met one of his relatives called Kahu, whose attraction was to read the future with tarot cards and all those things. However, she tells him that for the moment she cannot do anything since an unknown person called Yumohi had stolen his wheel of fortune and left her a letter warning her of the theft. This is how the first day of the festival ends, so the club meets and Satoshi asks for help from Chitanda and Ibarra for the cooking competition in teams tomorrow. Although moments before they remembered that Chitanda returned to the club to leave some things, it turns out that among all that there was an envelope with pictures that Chitanda took while cosplaying, and our protagonist looked at them, but the fool forgot to close the envelope, so she realized that he saw her pictures. The next day, the robberies of this Jumohi didn't stop, so Satoshi thought it was the perfect opportunity to be like his idol Sherlock Holmes. While Chitanda, besides asking for help to Irisu to sell the anthologies, also asked her to teach her how to get things from people, in short, to manipulate them. So she gives her the secret tips that Chitanda will later put into practice. Later, the whole literature club gathered together and Chitanda showed the mysterious letters of Jumohi to Hotaro, as he had also stolen a spoon from the cooking club. So she started to suffocate him with her curiosity, but Satoshi also came up with an idea to sell the anthologies, as every detail of the mysterious case will be sold to the newspaper club and the radio club because they are counting on Detective Hotaro to catch Jumohi. In short, a bait for customers. But since he didn't like that idea, he decides to think about the mystery, so he asked what clubs have been robbed so far, and they were the Go Club, the Acapella Club, the Cooking Club, and the Divination Club, as he comes to the conclusion that the thief was following a pattern of robbery like the alphabet, so the last club to be robbed was the Classic Literature Club. So Chitanda again goes with Togaito to put his manipulation lessons into practice, but it doesn't work out so well. The next day, our protagonist never imagined that his sister would go to visit the festival. Besides that, again, Hotaro made a small exchange of a mirror he had received from Ibarra for a manga called The Body of the Night, while Chitanda was at the radio club as a special guest because of the whole Jumohi case. Although after returning to the club, she managed to recognize the manga that Hotaro was reading, so she borrowed it from him and then went to see Ibarra and told her that there is a poster very similar to the illustrations in the manga to promote the festival. So there was a chance that the owner was among all the people. So they go to the council to ask for the person responsible for drawing the poster and find out that in the manga the president was the one who did it and another person was the one who wrote it. All that was quite strange for our protagonist. There was something that did not quite fit. Everyone saw him very immersed in his world of thoughts and realized that he had discovered something about Yumohi. He proceeds to tell Satoshi the secret. First, he mentions why Yumohi steals 10 things from 10 different clubs, then why he leaves greeting cards at crime scenes, and finally why he uses the word lust instead of taking, apart from leaving a book about the festival tour. Last year, the manga A Body in the Night came out, where they announced that the following year there will be a manga about an ultra-famous play, and by pure coincidence, in this festival things were happening as if they were taken from that play they mentioned. That same afternoon, while Chitanda was having her interview at the radio club, she took the opportunity to make publicity about her new anthology and the possible attack of Yumohi to her club, so it was obvious that many students will go to the place to see it with their own eyes and buy her anthology. However, Satoshi's phone rang unexpectedly, and after that his manuscript that was on a desk started to burn. Next to it, there was an anthology with Mohi's letter that said that the literature club lost their manuscript, so the club did become popular, but not in the way they expected. What no one knew is that before the attack, Hotaro had already discovered Yumohi, who was a member of the student council called Tanabe Hiro, because while Satoshi was looking for him, Hotaro could observe him talking to someone in the school parking lot, and there he found out all the strong evidence that our protagonist had to say with conviction that Tanabe was the thief because Yumohi tried to send a message in the form of a code to a person who was the only one capable of decoding it. Apart from following the same storyline of that famous story, the thief also managed to copy the schedule of the festival guide, so only someone from the committee was able to manipulate it. Apart from that, there was a very clear clue since it was based on the manga of A Body in the Night, where its author, the president Hyouka, in team with Anho Haruna, should know about the sequence of that famous story. So, of the members of that team, only one person knew the original story, and there was also Ahimo Hyouka as the author of the manga, who was nothing more than a mixture of the characters of the three members who wrote the manga. So, removing some initials from the name with the data he had, it was left with only two words, D and Ta, which could only belong to a person who was at last year's festival, but who also knows the president very well and knows that he draws manga. And the only person who fulfilled all that was Tarabejido. He was obviously shocked to know that someone who had nothing to do with it was able to decode that difficult code that was actually a kind of a statement that he could never tell Anko Haruna. Here comes the business moment, as Hotaro asked him to have the student council buy 30 copies of the Hyouka anthology for him to resell on his website, all in exchange for him keeping Yumohi's secret. But Tanabe could not buy it without a reason. Again, Hotaro gave him the answer, since by attacking the literature club, both he and Satoshi will be accomplices of his last theft. So from there comes the supposed accident we saw earlier, where the manuscript of the literature club started to burn from nowhere. After a few days, while they were hanging out in the literature club, suddenly a helicopter passes very close to their school, and Hotaro remembers that there was a teacher named Oji who always got excited like a child whenever he saw a helicopter. However, Satoshi mentions that there was once a squadron that made an incredible formation, but the teacher didn't seem to react as usual. So for the first time in his whole life, Hotaro was curious about this mystery and wanted to go to the library to investigate a little more. In the end, he was only accompanied by Chitanda to go to the library, and as she went ahead, she was able to find information about Professor Oji, which was more like news from when he was a climber who participated along with 11 other volunteers to collect garbage from around a mountain. But Hotaro already had an idea of what could have happened to him, but to make sure, they decided to check more old newspapers with the keyword lost. And once they were given a book with the information they wanted, they found a news about two lost members of the Monitoring Association and came to the conclusion that Oji was one of the lost members who were waiting anxiously for a helicopter to fly that day to save him. But to his bad luck, that same day the weather got worse. In short, that sound of a helicopter nearby always reminded him of the hope he had when he was lost. Then, while they were on their way home, Titanga asked him again why he was curious about a topic like this. Basically, our protagonist wanted to know the truth, not to behave insensitively with his teacher, saying that he likes helicopters when in fact it is something even deeper. After hearing all that, Titanda tried to tell him something, but she didn't know how to express it. Although, what she was happy about was to know that unexpected side of our protagonist. A few days later, Chitanda called Hotaru to ask him if he had any plans for the new year, since she wanted to invite him to the temple. Apart from the fact that Ibara would also be there, but as an assistant for a job she had, and Satoshi agreed to go as well. After a while, New Year's Eve arrived and Chitanga wore the kimono that impressed Hotaru. Then they went to the place of their friend Kaho to show their respect and good wishes for the new year, although Hotaru only observed the way distinguished families behaved. They continued on their way to visit Ibara, who was finishing her shift in an hour. Then they returned to Kaho's place and she asked for their help to go to the store to get more serving bowls, so Hotaru decided to go with her. But when they entered the store, the door closed and the two of them went in together. So now they had to wait in that very cold, desperate room until someone helped them, or Hotaru shouted as loud as he could for someone to hear them. However, Chitanda stops him and tells him that he can't do that because the local people and temples know her, and in short, they will misunderstand seeing that she was just by chance left alone with a guy and neither of them had their phone with them. So Hotaru managed to open a small hole with a shovel so that Chitanga threw a handkerchief on the ground that is easy to recognize for anyone who knows it is hers, and as she planned, the handkerchief was picked up by a gentleman who took it to the local where she was, and Ibara, with the help of Satoshi, tried to decode the message, but they couldn't understand it. Hotaru threw his wallet, and then, as a last option, they threw Chitanda's purse tied up a rope, and no Satoshi understood the message, and went running to the shed to save them, since Hotaru was almost freezing to death. Then we see a flashback on Valentine's Day when Ibara tried to give chocolate to Satoshi, but he made up an excuse not to accept it. But Ibara took it as a challenge to surprise him the following year, and that's where this new story begins because once the long-awaited date arrived, we see Ibara leaving her artwork on the club's table, where Chitanga could see it and realize all the effort she made. But while our protagonist was calmly at the library, out of nowhere Chitanda, together with Satoshi, tells him that something horrible happened since Ibara's chocolate had been stolen, because she left the door of the club open and wanted Hotaru to help her. So everyone goes to the club to explain the whole situation. Once he knew all the details, the difficult thing was to go asking among the clubs who had seen some chocolates, so in the end they returned to the club, but Hotaru was almost sure to know who was responsible. However, Ibara appeared, and when she heard that her chocolates were stolen, she felt very bad, so she preferred to go home, and Chitanda felt guilty for what happened. Our protagonist stopped her and asked her to let him take care of it. Besides, he couldn't do it with her there. So Chitanda trusts him and leaves the club, and after a while, Hotaru and Satoshi leave too. But on the way, our protagonist asked him to see his bag, since there was Ibara's chocolate broken into 1,000 pieces that apparently Satoshi did not hesitate one bit to break all that effort of hers. But this time, Hotaru wanted to know why he did it. This is how Satoshi speaks and says that in his past, he only wanted to win without reason and he was demanding in many things, but in the end it wasn't fun for him at all. However, now he does not take much importance of any of that. But there was a problem. Ibara wanted to be by his side. In a few words, he wanted to be with her, but he did not want to have the responsibility of worrying about her and thinking about how she feels. Even though Ibara already knew what was happening, she was still stubborn about someday getting Satoshi to look at her. So with that answer, our protagonist was able to know a new side of his best friend. Days later, our main character receives a call from Chitanda, who asked him as a favor to carry her umbrella while she was dressed as a doll for a traditional festival at the temple. So he agreed to help her and went to the place where he would receive all the necessary indications, but while the organizers were talking, Hotaru heard that the parade would pass through a street that is under construction. So he mentioned it to them and they had to see how to solve this problem. Chitanda calls her protagonist to use him as a messenger to tell the elders that she will tag to another prize, besides asking her father for help, so he went to tell them as he did and they started to work again. Then the parade started and our protagonist was starting to regret having agreed to help as his energy was going down the drain. But once they finished, Chitanda quickly went to our protagonist to ask him about that unexpected construction that caused the parade to take another way. But this time they both wrote their answer on their hand to show it at the same time, and it turns out that they both thought of the same person. The parade was unusual but in a good way, as they passed under a big cherry tree, which made everything so much better. Then they took a short walk on their way home since for their second year both will be separated by the subjects they choose, especially Chitanda who had to choose science because she was a role as a member of her family. She had two options. The first one was to succeed in developing a commercial product, and the second one was to increase the efficiency of her production by being an important manager of her family business, which was not the best option for her, but she still had to try not to lose the effort of her family. However, for a few moments, it seemed that Hotaro tried to tell her that he wanted to help her with her second option, that is, to take over her family business together with her. And although in the end he was not able to do it, he knew that there was still some time left to confess it to her.